Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Epay Tips and Changes webinar for the week of January the 18th. As we do in all our sessions, we do mute everybody, so please ask all questions via the GoToWebinar question area of the control panel, and they'll be addressed at the appropriate time in our conversations today. Now, as you did see in your Epay update this week, we have a few topics we want to go through today. First, I'm going to start off with a little update on the granular security items that we talked about last week on this same webinar. Then we're going to go into a little discussion about preparing for a Blue Force audit. And essentially what I mean by that is just going to go through the purposes of the reason codes. There's still a lot of questions, and we're finding that a lot of those reason codes aren't being used correctly. So we're going to go through the purpose and proper use of those reason codes. They're going to review the JDE employee setup, specifically the critical fields as they relate to the employee details tab in JD Edwards. Now, I do understand that some of you on this call do not have access to JD Edwards, but it'll be a good time to get the explanation as to how those fields work. And then we'll go through the timing of data updates. I think there's still some concern as to when data gets updated from JDE to Blue Force. And then we're going to go through a slide that I've used in prior webinars before, but we're going to talk about user expectations. You know, what exactly is expected of the submitter? Well, first and foremost, the editor, submitter, and then also the approver roles in Blue Force. So let's start off with a quick update on granular security. So kind of what I talked about last week is, that granular security is going to give you some controls, give you some rights to make some changes to the employee and job site profiles in Blue Force. And give you some flexibility as well on your day-to-day roles that you have as a editor, submitter, and approver. Now, one thing that, as I mentioned last week, that we were going to go ahead and do that over this past weekend. Now, that didn't occur. We actually have some other updates and some features that are going to be updated on Wednesday evening. So we're right now telling everyone that we're going to go and activate the granular security portion of those changes on Thursday afternoon. So this Thursday afternoon, those will be in effect and active for everyone. So thank you for all those that emailed me on Monday trying to get it in there and start using the system as we spoke about last week. It's we're there. We're pretty darn close, just haven't turned them on. So Thursday you'll have access to those functionalities. So let's go into the Blue Force audit. So what can we do to prepare for a Blue Force audit? Now, three key things, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about. And first thing we're going to talk about here is the reason codes. Now, reason codes, it's something that's fairly easy to use in Blue Force. However, we're finding, like I mentioned, that a lot of users are not using them correctly as we intended. So we want to make sure that we go ahead and review the proper use of reason codes. So let's start there with our conversation today. Now, as I mentioned, reason codes are essentially reasons, or maybe more so comments, that are available for you to select from a drop-down list when primarily editing a time card. So one of the key things about this, and like I said, we want to prepare everyone for a Blue Force audit because, as you know, we have an audit department. We also have our team from overseas, from our Denmark office, that always audits comes in, and they tend to audit the different countries around the world. And one of the key things we want to focus on is, making sure that our payroll is, going to be audited, and it's going to be audited correctly, and it's going to be good to go when they actually do that. So the first key point I want to look at here is reason codes. Now, reason codes here primarily are based at the time card level. And so whenever you make any change to a time card entry, in other words, an employee has punched in and punched out, anytime you make a change to that employee's time, whether it be the in, whether it be the out, or whether it be both punches, whether it be a change to the work order, whether it be a change to the job they clocked in, any change on that time card line will require a selection of a reason from the reason code listing. So anytime you make a change, you have to pick a valid reason code. And what I mean by valid, just don't go and pick anything in there and say, okay, I'm good to go, I'm done. Make sure it is actually a correct reason. So users cannot just go in there and type it in. You have to pick it from the list. And this change is required, once again, for better reporting and accountability when it comes to audits, and will provide a path for the forthcoming attendance policy tracker. So one of the things I mentioned, I think one of the last conversation we had on this was probably early fall on one of these webinars. One of the things I mentioned is we are looking at here in 2016 is rolling out an attendance policy tracker for everyone to use. And one of the key things would be this reason codes and where it's going to feed off of. So it's important that the reason codes are set up correctly. Now, when editing a time card, and you go in and edit a time card, I'm going to demo this here momentarily. But when you go and edit a time card, the line, as it's shown here on the screen, looks very similar. Shows you the job, shows you the task, shows you the rate type, shows you the end date, the end time, the out date, and the out time. Shows you a work order field if you have a work order. But anytime you go in here to add, maybe in this case I add a work order, or anytime I go in here to make a change, whether it be to the punch time, whether it be to any of these fields that's available, you are going to be required to put in a reason code. Now, one of the things you will notice, and I'll demo this in a little bit, when you go in and put in a reason code, and you don't select it, you leave it blank, you cannot save. But one of the key things about the system is the save function will give you a little red dot right to the left of the employee's name, and it'll let you know that you can't save this record because you're missing something. Now, as a side note, whenever you go into a time card and go to edit the time card, if you see a red dot, don't need to panic. Just put your arrow, your mouse arrow, right on top of that red dot, and it will tell you what exactly you did wrong or what you're missing. That's the inherent part of the system. And I bring that up because many users still contact us in a panic that they can't finish a time card because, again, there's red dot. Well, if you just put your arrow right on top of that red dot, no need to click or anything, just rest it on top of that red dot, the system will return a little message. It'll tell you right there where you put right over the red dot, letting you know that you forgot a reason code, or you forgot an out punch, or you forgot, whatever the issue was. Now, as far as the reason codes go for this discussion, on the right-hand side of the screen here, you'll see a listing of all the reason codes that are available. Now, there are a lot that are available. You will see that they're actually broken out into two parts here, and that's how I'm going to cover them when we go through this discussion. Now, the top section here that I've tried to put a little square around or rectangle around, that top section of the reason codes are the ones that you're probably using the most. Those are your day-to-day, usage reason codes. Now, in this middle section here, you have some absence ones we'll go through as well. These absence ones are notating early and late punches. Those are informational reason codes per se. They're mostly used to record someone's absence or record when they were late, stuff of that nature. We can put in the system just for recording purposes. So we have that flexibility in the system. I'll go through that as well. And I do see some users on here that use those middle reason codes, so that'll be a review for you guys. And at the very bottom, the very last one here is that zero time card. We're going to go through that in detail as to when you should be using the zero time card. All right, so let me go ahead and get out of here, and I'm going to close out my screen. All right, so let's go on and let's go through one by one what exactly those reason codes entail. So let's start off with that first one, and the first one here is add manual job hours, and it's called approved manual jobs only. Now, one of the things to keep in mind as we go through this is you have this first one. It says add manual jobs only, and it's keep in mind that employees who cannot punch in and punch out because there's no time collection devices at that site should use this add manual job hours option. That should be the option when someone is keying in their time into the system. Now, keep note that this is only for those sites that have been approved to not have a time collection system in place. So most of the time, the reason why we do not have a time collection method in place is because it's a very low margin job. It doesn't make sense to have more expenses than what we're getting in for the job. Sometimes it's the ratio of employees to maybe the cost outweigh the whole purpose here. Maybe you just don't have enough employees. Maybe you have one employee. It's in the very remote section of the city that you're in, and there's really no way, shape, form to give them. And there's some cases where cell phones don't work in that area as well. You name it, there's an issue. In those cases, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but those have to be approved by our COO in order to officially be deemed as manual job hours. So whenever you use this, we are looking at to see, how many times it's being used, and are those jobs actually approved manual jobs. So keep that in mind. Second one on the list is add miss punch, employee fault. This is just straight out forward. This is the one you're probably going to use the most. If an employee misses a punch, maybe they forget to punch in this morning, but they do punch out, you're going to go to the time card, you're going to see an out punch sitting there by itself, and you have to go and correct that line to make it a valid punch. So what you're going to do is you're going to edit time card, you're going to go in there and fix that in punch, and you're going to put a code of add miss punch and employee fault. So anytime it's the employee's fault, they basically forgot to punch in, punch out, you want to note it as employee fault. The third one is a big one because we also want to make sure that we're on top of our game here at ISS and in our IT team. We want to make sure that if we have a system issue that it's noted. If you ever go to the time card and have to key in someone's time because of a system issue, this is the reason why you want to use this particular reason code. So bottom line, employee cannot punch in and out because the time collection system is unavailable. If they use the phone-in system and the phones aren't available, that could be a system issue. If they go to a Walter time clock and the Walter is just blacked out, it's not even turned on for whatever reason, it's plugged in but not working, that is a system issue. So in those cases, note that. If you're using a mobile device and an employee is out in the middle of nowhere and it's not registering their punch because it's just so remote that the GPS can't find them, that might be a system issue. So let's go ahead and put that as such. Next one, you add in a missed punch because of a new employee. So let's say there's a new employee who comes in, or an applicant that comes in today, gets hired, and you immediately need him to go to work. Because that happens a lot in our industry, we understand that. In those cases, the employee may not have, well, obviously, probably more than likely would not have all the hiring process completed in the system, but they are starting to work. In those cases, where you have a new employee working but has not able to be, officially put into the system or officially available in Blue Force yet, their time has to be entered in the system to get paid. So in those cases, when you add their punches, you can add it as a missed punch for a new employee. Now, the fifth one here on the list is one of the newer ones we just added not too long ago. This is when you add a missed punch because it's work related. And what I mean by that is, you ask an employee to run an errand, a task, maybe make a delivery. They have to leave the job site for whatever reason. And sometimes maybe it makes more practical sense for them just to leave when they're done. Maybe they call you or the supervisor, or they note that they've left. They're done for the day. In those cases, sometimes it makes sense for them to just go home instead of coming all the way back to the job site. In those cases where you have to go in there and fix their punch, add that missed punch, you want to make sure you note it as work related. So essentially, they don't have a capability to punch in or punch out. Now, what I do recommend is if they do have a cell phone, they have a ability to call in that phone-in number, that they do that, so we have an accurate note or a record in the system that they actually did punch out. The last two on the list are common because occasionally the employees will call in, they will punch in, punch out correctly, but sometimes the employee simply just clocks into the wrong job. Some of those Walters have a selection of jobs on them that they can pick from, so they call in the wrong job, or they punched into the wrong task, or maybe they forgot to put a work order and you need to associate their time to a work order. In any of those cases, correct codes, parentheses, job, task, work order, or rate type is the proper change or proper reason code to use when you make that change. So users who need to change a job number, so they clocked in a job A, but they really need to clock in a job B. As an editor, submitter, approver, you can make those changes. So Keep that in mind. You do that through the Edit Time Card section. I'll demo all this once again right after this slide. Add change work order. So if you ever need to add a work order to a job, for those allocating time to work orders, or simply change them to a different work order, you can do that through this using this reason code. Or the rate type. Maybe they clocked in as regular time, but after all said and done, like the holiday just happened, you need to go to the Edit Time Card and maybe change your time to holiday 2x or holiday double time as a rate type, because they should have been paid double time because they worked on that holiday. Whatever it may be, you can actually make those changes accordingly as needed. And then lastly, you have correct hours. So maybe you just have to correct the hours. Maybe the employee didn't have an issue clocking in, but for whatever reason, they punched in late. They punched in 5 minutes late because they got to the job site, forgot they had to go back to the clock. They went back to the clock, clocked in. In that time, they lost 5 minutes, and you have to fix that time. If you have to do stuff like that, use correct hours as a reason code. So basically, which is going to be audited. I need to make that known. One of the big things about this, although we have the reason codes here in play, that does not take away from the fact that we do not want the employee's time being edited just for the sheer sake of being able to do so. We should always have the employees be responsible for punching in and punching out. Their time is what's binding in the system. If we're adding their time every day, if we're going in there and adjusting their time every day, that defeats the purpose of this system, but also defeats the purpose of when it comes to audit time. So one of the key things from our audit department, our HR department, is we want the employee to be responsible for punching in and punching out. So let me take a quick pause here. Let me open up my Internet Explorer, and let me log in and show you a few of these functions that we're talking about. So let me clear off some of my things here. All right. So let us do this. Let's go over to Blue Force. All right. So logging in now into Blue Force. And actually, I'm going to use my test login here. All right, so I'm now here into my login, and I'm seeing my Blue Force window. And kind of a recap for everybody, and hopefully everyone here is familiar how to do the time card screen. But when I do the time card, to see time cards, obviously, the first thing I'm going to be prompted with is this window, in which I just go to the middle, click on the clock icon in the middle of the screen called Time Cards. Once I go into Time Cards, the first thing I'm always going to get prompted with is if I have not already selected my jobs I want to work with, the system's going to ask you at this point, select the jobs that you wish to work with. And it's right here in the very top of the screen. Okay? All you do is you check the jobs you want to work with and select them off of your selection criteria down below. Or you can always say select all at the very top of the grid. That selects everything on that page. And I always bring this up is if you want to work with all the jobs, that's perfectly fine. But keep in mind, if I only choose to pick one group or one job, everything is going to be related and only going to reflect that particular job that I've selected. So that's a big question we always get is, you know, I can't see my jobs, or I can't see the employee's time or the time cards for that one job. Well, lo and behold, when we come back and get the user on the phone and look here, we find out that the user does not have that job selected that they want to look at. So keep in mind, my recommendation would say always say select all so you can see everything. But if you don't, like I said, if you don't want to see everything, you're more than welcome just to go in and pick a specific grouping. If I have a grouping already created, in this case I do. Actually, I do have a grouping in here set up. I have this one called test group. If I just choose to pick that one grouping, it's going to pick all the jobs within that group. So one of the things I'll come off of my soapbox here with a time card screen or the job setup screen is one of the things to keep in mind is you have groups that are selected that are created for you out there already. And those often are led with a number 1. And anytime you see anything out here that says a number 1 in front of it, those are typically your clock groups that are set up for the clock purposes of grouping jobs on that clock. Sometimes you will see, and those, or lower below, you will see your districts that are created as well. Like this one is highlighted for District 10401. In any case, if you ever see in the job name field, you see a little plus sign. The plus signs are just telling you that those are groupings of jobs. That's really all it's telling you. So don't panic when you see, two 10401s. You may have two 10401s on there, and if you do, one of them is probably a grouping of that district job and of all the jobs within that district, and the other one that doesn't have that plus sign is probably going to be just that district job itself. So just keep that in mind. If you ever see that, don't panic. That plus sign is just letting you know that you have a grouping of jobs. So for my grouping, for my example up here, I'm going to just pull up that one test group that I have for this purpose of using as an example. Now, once I've picked that grouping or picked the jobs I want to work with, they will appear at the bottom left-hand side of my window here. So if I go down here to the bottom left-hand side, I'll notice here that they're down here, and I'm circling that in the blue for you. All right. So once I'm done selecting the job, then I go straight into the time card view, in which now I have the option to adjust the dates I want to look at. So one of the big things to keep in mind here is the top of the screen. I have a date from and date to. So that's going to govern what dates you see down here in the screen. You also have some options at the top of the screen where you have punch type. And for those that have been on prior webinars with me in which we talked about our daily review of time, I've always talked about coming to that punch type and telling the system you want to show open and zero punches, because one of the things about the screen is you want to see the zero punches, because zero punches sometimes come out as phantom punches in the system, or that's kind of often they're referred to. And you look and you see that you have an open punch, but you can't locate that. More than likely, it's a zero punch that's out there, meaning that someone has put an in punch and the out punch to be identical. So in the system, when you see a 6 o'clock in and a 6 o'clock out, that basically washes itself out, but it gets hidden in the background here. So show open and zero punches will force those punches to pop out on the screen. Now, also down below, you have your actual time card. And one of the things to keep in mind is whenever you're ready to go edit a time card, the first thing you're going to want to do is simply go and select the time card line that you want to work with. In this case, I have Mr. Torres's job of 5009581. He punched in and he punched out. Perfectly good punches. The punches like this that are in white backgrounds are letting you know that those came from the Walter device. You can use the time card legend up at the top left-hand corner of the grid. By clicking on that link, it'll pop out a little legend for you. So if I click on this little link right here, it's going to pop out this legend, and it's kind of hidden behind my buttons right here, but I can we'll scroll up and scroll down and see that a little bit better. But that gives you a little time card legend of what those color codes mean when you see different colors on the screen. In this case, let's say I need to edit the punch, and it's probably not a good example. Let me go back a little bit on dates and see if I can find some good open punches that we can work at or work with. In any case, this job has done actually a good job of picking up their jobs, punches in, punches out. All the employees are doing a great job here. But let's just say one of these punches was a miss. We had a missed punch. If I go in here at any point and make a change to any of these fields, once again, your reason codes will pop up at this point. Now, if I go in here and make a change, for example, let me add a work order. I come over here to save. You're going to notice that that little red dot pops up that I'm talking about. That little red dot is letting you know if there's an issue with that time card line. Now, I know I've talked to a couple of you on this call, but in this case, when you see a red dot, if you just go and hit close at the top of the screen, you haven't saved your work. Got to keep in mind that if you see a red dot on the screen at any point, your work has not been saved. You want to be successful here and make sure you get a green dot. In order to see a green dot or to figure out what has gone wrong, like I mentioned, there's no need to panic, there's no need to call us, there's no need to call Epay support. Just simply take your mouse arrow and rest it on top of that red dot, and it's going to tell you what exactly is wrong. In this case, it popped up, reason code is required. So when you see that little pop-up come up that says reason code is required, that should be a key to you, letting you know that you can go down to the reason code, put in the reason code, and obviously it would actually accept that change. In this case, I'm not going to make a change because this is actually a valid punch, but that is still letting you know that if any time I see a red dot, put in my arrow right on top of that little circle, it's going to tell me reason code is required. It's going to tell me another message. Whatever that message is, do what it says, and come back and save again, and I guarantee you that circle will turn to green. Once it's green, then you can obviously close out of here, and then this particular window will reflect that change. Now, if I was doing this from scratch, for example, if I need to add a time card from completely brand new time card for someone who maybe was a new employee, or for whatever reason maybe was working a manual job, I can come up here to the very top of the screen, pick the employee off the list, and what I'm going to do here is let me pick on our buddy Edward I use every webinar. And on Edward's record, I just have to come over here and hit Add Time Card. The system will automatically dump his name into a grid several times with several blank fields that I have now availability to work with. Now this screen is just taking just a tad to update for us, so just give it a second. But when it pops up here, now I'll have full reign to go in there and tell the system what job they worked at, or this employee worked at, what rate type is it? Is it a regular rate? Is it I'm entering a time card for a different type of rate? Whatever it may be. I have the capability of also entering a work order, but more importantly, the in and out punches. So now you can see here, I can go in here and say, I want to look at any of these jobs. And the question always comes up is, you know what? I'm adding a time for Edward, but the job that I need is not on this drop-down list. You know, what happened? Why can't I see that job that's missing off the list? Well, first and foremost, Edward can work any of these 5 jobs they're showing. That's not the problem. The reason why you can't see the job maybe you're looking for, maybe I'm looking for job 5020001. I can't find on this list. The problem here is the reason you can't see it is because if I scroll over the left, and remember at the very beginning I mentioned that if you didn't select the job at the very beginning, you're not going to be able to work with it. Same thing here. If a job is not in this little section, or not a part of the selected job count that's down here, in this case I have 5 jobs selected, you are not going to be able to code time, edit that time card to change a job that an employee worked at, or add a time card, do anything with that intended job because you did not select it from the get-go. So keeping that in mind, I'm kind of limited to these jobs. If I need to add that other job that I'm looking for to code time correctly for Edward, then I'm going to have to go back to the selection criteria, hit select, and pick the other job that I want to work with and add it to the list. So keep that in mind. That's one of the big things we've encountered when it comes to editing time cards. Now, we'll say for this particular day, he worked at my main office job, which is perfectly fine. He was a custodian. He worked a regular rate. He punched in on the 19th, which is today, at, let's say he punched in at 7 a.m., and he's punched out at noon. He actually we're gonna charge this to the maintenance work order that's created out there for him. And the reason code we're gonna do for him is that he simply was a new employee, and we had to add his missed punch. By doing that and everything being completely correct here, I can hit save. You will get the green circle by letting you know that it's good and it's been saved. Then I can close. Now notice that you have other lines. If I need to add more lines, I'm more than welcome to do that. The key thing to keep in mind is this screen, whenever you go into add a time card, it always defaults to the current date. So keep that in mind. If you ever come in here and add time, pay attention to the dates. So if you meant to put the 18th and accidentally put the 19th here, guess what? His time is going to the 19th instead of the 18th. So just keep in mind of that. Just be vigilant on that when you go through these screens. Now, once I hit close, it'll take it back to the grid that you were just at, and you'll notice that Edward's time is added, but you'll notice one big thing is you'll see that there's yellow markings. That yellow highlights that are on that particular field are letting you know that these 2 times were manually entered into the system. So one of the things with the reason codes, you have told the system you added it because it was a mispunch. But anytime you do anything that's manually added in the system, you're going to see yellows. And yellows are just letting you know that it was manually entered in the system. And from a quick audit perspective, or kind of a quick view of all the punches that are in there, you'll see that it's quick for your eye to point out that which ones were manually entered. So for those that have access or kind of oversee teams that are in the field that are actually reviewing their time on a daily basis, it's a good idea just to go in here one day, show all jobs, show all employees, and just do an overview of all your jobs and see how many are actually being manually edited. And I'll guarantee that'll surprise you. And I bring this up right now because one of the things that we were doing at the end of 2015, we're doing those like every 6 weeks we'll send out a listing of rankings of companies of areas where everyone was at in relation to kind of some of the audit topics that we've gone through with Blue Force. Those are going to be starting back up in here in the next few weeks. We're going to kick those back off. But we're going to have a different tool at our disposal that you can actually see this on a daily basis. And some of the management that's on this call today may know about that. It's a product called Hubble that is working in conjunction with Epay that actually will give you live data as to how you're doing with your audits. I can go in here right now and see to the minute how I'm doing on the audits. How many items do I have open? How many items have been altered? So we have that flexibility. So we want to get everyone to start thinking about getting back on track with audits and staying on top of that. So that's why I'm bringing up the reason code today. So let me clear my screen here. And that's kind of my first intro. I just want to show you the reason codes piece, just so everyone understands, obviously, this color coding, how it works. If I go in there and make any changes to data that once it's already in there, so this was already manually added to the system. But if I ever go back on top of that and make a change, and I'm just going to go in here and say correct hours, say save, close. Anytime I go and make an additional change, you'll see that it'll go to orange. And then orange is not letting you know that a record was entered in the system. Someone made a change to that on top of that original entry. Anytime I go and make changes to an original in and out punch, you will see orange as well as a color reflecting that change. All right, so let's get back to these slides real fast. So I can show you some other reason codes and kind of go through some of the unique ones that we have out there. So these unique ones that I'm mentioning are reason codes that we've set up kind of to help you track items. So the question's always been, can I enter paid absences? Yes, you can. So anytime you go in there and enter a paid absence, such as a vacation, holiday, maybe you do have a sick leave or something like that, you can put a reason code of enter paid absence. If I ever want to go in there and track an unpaid absence, or specifically, it's called unpaid absence here, but specifically track an absence, I can go in here and then note that you've got a user that maybe needs to add an authorized or unpaid absence for tracking purposes. So in cases like that, I can go through and note those in the system. I also have abilities to notate an early or late punch. So maybe it's authorized that someone comes in early, and I need to note that in the system. Or it's authorized that they can come in later than their normal schedule. I want to note that in Blue Force. This is an informational piece that can be used to your benefit. So if you think that you want to use these 4 options, you're more than welcome to use them. But the one out of all these codes that are on this list, the one that I want everyone to kind of draw their attention to is that 0 time card option. Now, one of the functionalities that you have over in Blue Force, and let me go back in here real fast, is that you do have an ability to tell the system, I want to 0 out a time card. And it's located right here at the top of your time card grid. Now, that 0 out selected time card essentially allows you to 0 out a line, basically remove a line from existence in Blue Force. Now, to tell you the truth, it really doesn't go completely away. It goes in the background, but you do no longer have access to view it. It does come out on audit reports or audit reviews, but you just don't see it on the screen. zero out selected time card, like I mentioned, basically wipes out a punch. Many of you on this phone call use that incorrectly because we should never remove an employee's punch from the system. We should really go to that punch and edit it to make it correct. Once again, the system is collecting time. The employee is validating that they're at the job site, so they're punching in and punching out. So we want to make sure that they use the system correctly, and in turn that we're not discounting those punches for any reason. So let me go back to my slide, and let me just point out the couple points on that zero time card. So at the very bottom of the screen there, the one thing to keep in mind is that the employee punched in the system 2 successive times, and the second entry should be zeroed out. So the only valid time that a zero time card function should be used is when the employee has mistakenly recorded more punches than he or she should have. So the example I will show you here on the next screen will reflect that. So let me go back out of here. And the example here would be simply that an employee punches in, okay, punches out, and you'll notice in the very top example here, the employee punched in and punched out, and the time came on two different lines. Two successive punches that appear on 2 different lines. And in this case, as I mentioned here, we want to zero out one of the lines and correct the other. So essentially, the second punch could have been zeroed out with us coming back in and correcting that first punch. That way, we really never got rid of the employee's punches. We got rid of one of them, but we still have a record that is still linked on here. So if you ever went back to the audit trail on this particular example, this punch as 1840 is the one that we actually kept. This punch would have been noted that the employee punched in successfully, and then we actually edited that time. Now this is a screenshot that I made up for our discussion today, but in reality, this particular line that's right now with a blue arrow, this little field should be in yellow, would have appeared in yellow because we manually corrected that punch. All right. So just to recap, so what do you do if an employee punches in twice in a row? We're going to remove that extra punch. We're going to go in using that zero out selected time card, and then we're going to then go to for the in punch, zero out the second punch, or for the out punch, zero out the first punch. It doesn't really matter, if that second punch happened before or after. The key thing in mind is we want to keep one of those punches and fix the other. Remove one of those punches and fix the other. The zero out selected time card button will not be used for any reason. So keep in mind, we never want to zero out an employee's time in the time card and enter hours straight in the timesheet. That's just a no-no. We don't want to go around that, circumvent it. There's so many situations where we say, you know what, we want to get rid of the time altogether and just key it in because it's easier. Yeah, it's not really easier, and it's not correct. And secondly, we don't want to zero out the time card from just because we can. And the big thing is because the risk of paying an employee incorrectly and questionable audit trails for the Department of Labor. Being such a large company, being involved in just about almost every state in the U.S. Puts us at a lot of bigger risk and a lot of view for a Department of Labor audit. So we always want to make sure that we're not, taking advantage of this particular functionality. So that's kind of a recap of the actual 2 different lines. I have one quick question here. It says, why do punch ins and punch outs sometimes record on 2 different lines instead of one single line? There's actually a few different reasons why that could occur. Sometimes, let me go back to this one screen here. Give me 1 second. All right, so if I go back to here. So for the example at the very top of the screen, the employee punched in here and then punched out, but it came on 2 different lines. Now, for this particular example, the employee, and this is actually what happened on a similar employee, I worked at the same job site, there might be multiple clocks at that site. Each clock will sync independent of one another. So from a Walter perspective, if an employee, let's say, clocked in at 6:40 and their clock synced at 7 o'clock, The punch would go to Blue Force and sit there. If this employee went to another clock, punched out, that second punch should come over when the clock syncs. However, if that punch, if that clock wasn't syncing, or maybe the communication was lost, was offline, that punch will stay on that clock until it restores communication. In those cases, that employee might not get a paired punch because that sync occurred later than it should have. If it happens the next day, a couple of days down the road, at some point Blue Force says, you know, I'm going to give up waiting for that out punch, and at that point the system just puts it into the different line. So that's the most common reason. Other reasons may be thresholds. Maybe an employee punches in at 6 a.m., works a double shift. 16 hours later, he punches out. The system records it as a different line. As a default around the country, unless we've spoken about this, as a default we have a 14-hour threshold. And that basically says that if an employee punches in and does not punch out within that 14-hour threshold, the system says, you know what, I'm done. I'm giving up on this employee. I'm not going to expect him to pair up this punch today. So basically resets itself and treats every punch after that as a separate line. So that's an inherent system setting we have in there, because if an employee punches in today, is off tomorrow, and just punches in again on this 2 days later, we don't want those two punches to pair up by accident and give them 24 hours of working time or 48 hours of working time. So at some point we have to tell the system to give up, stop waiting for that out punch. So that would cause a situation as well. So another question is, if they punch in and out on the phone-in, would that cause a problem? Possibly. Phone-in can have the issue as well. It's not as common in phone-in, but it can happen as well, and it's hard for me to give you a specific example. There's different scenarios. Mostly, I would say they would revolve around technology. So if someone had an issue punching in, punching out, that could it could cause the employee just to have the lines in two different, the punches on two different lines. Phone is a little more difficult to kind of work through, but it could. It's always a possibility. All right, so let's go on. We've got a couple other things we want to discuss here. So let me move on to my next slide. And I just want to go back real fast to the discussion we had about the manual jobs. So recap the manual jobs, as I mentioned a while ago. If you ever use that reason code for manual jobs as add miss punch because it's a manual job, we want to make sure that that is approved by our COO. So that has to be approved. We're just not going to accept any time in there as manual jobs. Hours entered directly into Blue Force timesheet view for those. So there's no really need to record an in and out punch unless you want to record the in and out punch. Manual job should really just be the easiest way to do that is just go straight to the timesheet view and enter the hours there. Do not use the manual job entries or do not actually use the Blue Force timesheet view specifically whenever there's system calculations such as pay differentials or auto lunch deducts needed. So the way it works on those two topics is that the system automatically applies those rules that we have in place based on time recorded in the time card. So if you ever need to record a lunch deduction, or you need to have the system automatically do that, or automatically run pay differentials, those times should be entered, should not be entered using the timesheet view. And then lastly, enter total hours worked minus lunch if you're ever going to do the timesheet view. Those are the way to handle these manual job scenarios. Okay. All right, so real quick on the JDE employee setup, a couple of fields as far as the audit functionality works. A couple of fields that we've noticed, and this kind of goes, it's going to be more addressed to the users on the phone that have JDE access. But one of the key things to keep in mind is, as we mentioned, I know I've had this discussion probably a good year at least, since we've been live on Blue Force for a little over a year on some of your sites. One of the key things about the JDE employee setup screen is we have a employee details view. And in that view, we have employee tasks employees assignment type, and employees pay group. Those three fields, we're still finding that a lot of those fields are either being missed, ignored, or wrong information is being keyed into it. So I just want to have a quick discussion on those three fields. Now, for those that don't have JD access, just it's a good understanding point so you understand where that data comes from when you look at it in Blue Force. So the first thing is a task. Everyone always asks, where does the task come from? What is going on? Well, the task is coming from a combination of the employee's job type and step. So if the employee record, the employee record in Blue Force, the employee profile, shows the wrong task, chances are that if you go to JDE or have the person at your office who has access to JDE pull up their employee record, you're going to find that they have the wrong task associated. And the common questions that Tiandra and myself always get is, this employee is a custodian in Blue Force, is showing up as a custodian in Blue Force, but they really should be a mailroom clerk. Well, I pull up the employee record in JDE, and lo and behold, they're coded as a custodian. So one of the things to keep in mind is you can actually use a functionality called override task, it's shown right here, to override the task that's their default task. Once again, the default task is the system generates, the system automatically pulls in the default task based on their job type and step. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is then you also have the assignment type. The assignment type also drives functionality in Blue Force. The assignment type initially generates the list of jobs that's available for the employee to clock in and out of. So that's referred to as a working jobs tab over in Blue Force. If you go to that working jobs tab, and that's one of the functionality points that I mentioned at the very beginning from Granger Security, that's one of the things that's going to be available to everyone come Thursday to edit. But for the time being, any assignment types that are set up in JDE will flow over to Blue Force. So if I have a job assignment type here, let me go to my next slide so you can actually see the options. The job assignment type is going to give the ability for the employee to be assigned to their default job, and that's the only job they'll be able to clock in and out of. The district job is their district assignment type, will give them access to all of the jobs within a listed district. And then lastly, area assignment type gives that employee access to all the jobs within their city, area, company, all the different terms, but basically your entire office. So if you have the Houston office, you're going to have access as an area assignment type, you have access to all the jobs out of the Houston office. So that's the assignment type. Now, once you have access come this Thursday to go in there and edit the working jobs, you can add mix-match jobs to an employee. So if an employee is going to work, it's a district assignment type employee and has all these jobs for one district available to them, but they're going to be working, today at another job just temporarily, you can go into that working jobs tab, add that job to their employee profile under working jobs there, and they'll be able to clock in and out of that job. When they are done working that job, if you don't want that to be available to them anymore, you can go to their working jobs tab and remove that job. Simple as that. But the one that's the most important out of all three and the most critical that we've been getting the most calls about is the employee's pay group. This drives what rules, specifically OT, pay differentials, rounding, etc., that are going to be applied to that employee's timesheet. So it has to be correct, otherwise the employee runs the risk of getting paid incorrectly. I stress this because many a times the employee record is set up in J.D. Edwards and this pay group is not correct or left blank. If any of these fields are left blank on the employee record, the employee runs the risk of not appearing in Blue Force. And I'll explain the update functionality here in a little bit that we have in place. But regardless, the pay group drives all this functionality. If you set it up incorrectly, Blue Force will set it up. So for example, you're a California employee, but you're set up as a regular California employee and not actually in a pay group that maybe has a special union rule. What's going to happen is that default or whatever you initially set up the employee as is going to be set up over in Blue Force, and Blue Force is going to run with that setting. any changes you try to make to that pay group after the fact in JDE will not apply immediately. And you have to keep that in mind. It will not apply immediately, so there is going to be some delay causing you to run that risk of having that employee get paid incorrectly. So keep that in mind when we go into our next slide here on data timing. So as it comes to timing, specifically, most changes to an employee or job record in JDE will take up to 30 minutes to reflect. So within the next 30-minute window, at the top and the bottom of the hours when all these interfaces run, employee changes will appear correctly in Blueforce. So if you inactivate an employee, you activate a job, whatever it may be. If you change any information, as a default job, you change your name, you change any basic information, those typical changes occur every 30 minutes or within a 30-minute window. If you do it at 2:15 and then at 2:30, you can expect that change to start taking effect. I always tell everyone, give the system, the interface runs at 2:30 or at the top and the bottom of the hours. In this case, in my example, 2:30. However, it might take up to maybe 5-10 minutes after that for it to actually flow through and appear in the system, depending on how many changes or other processes are running at that same time. Now, other changes only occur on a weekly time frame. Every early Saturday morning, in the wee hours of the morning, pay group changes, pay rate changes, and assignment type changes actually push through to the system. Those only occur on a weekly basis. If you do catch that an employee is set up to the wrong pay group, it's payroll week and you're stressing, there are some things that Tiandra and I can do manually for you. However, I need to make it aware that these actually occur on a weekly basis, and that's the way Epay and Blueforce works. So keep in mind it's very critical that you set up those employees correct the first time. That way, we're not waiting until the end of time to at the last minute to actually make those changes. Now, furthermore, if any job or employee record in JD is set up or edited incorrectly, the record in question will not be created or updated in Blueforce. So if you ever miss a field, a critical field, for example, some new jobs lately have not appeared up in Blueforce. Come to find out, a couple of key fields on the job record, such as the pay group on the job record, or one of the key fields that I'm going to draw blank, but if a field is, if a job or employee record is not filled out correctly, bottom line, it's not going to appear over on the other side.
If they make a pay rate change?
Also, yeah, it's a good point. Also, pay rate changes do not just flow over if there's something wrong, incorrect on the employee record, and you try to make a pay rate change. That pay rate change will not flow over and reflect correctly. So we're then digging out, trying to figure out, where exactly is the fail here, and more times than not, it's because something was left incorrect on the employee side. All right, so as we wrap up our call today, let me just go over to our Blueforce user expectations. And some of you have seen this before, so just one more time is not going to hurt. But as far as expectations goes, for everyone on this phone call, if you're an editor, submitter, and approver, we're expecting that the daily review of Timecards is occurring. And that's typically the frontline employee, the editors and submitters. Punch approvals, which basically means you're reviewing the punches. If an employee had an issue with a fingerprint, call from an unauthorized number, all those type of approvals and corrections, general time card corrections, need to be made by 2 p.m. Central with a recap that's emailed to all submitters. So many of you on this phone call are getting daily emails, daily spreadsheets with your kind of overview as a recap of your jobs. That is going to be sent out every day at 3 p.m. Central Time daily. So keep in mind, if you don't make those changes, it's going to come out negative on that report. So have it done by 2, so when it's at 3 o'clock, it'll be sent out correctly. If you have a clock site, you can do those punch approvals and corrections right on the Walter device. So those users that are set up as supervisors or hence reviewers at the site, you have access to doing that. Editors and submitters, you can go into Blueforce and do those changes. Reviewers, that role is unfortunately just relegated just to the clocks only. And obviously, if you don't have a clock at your site, if you're using phone-in, If your employees are using the mobile device, they're using the web punch device, punch approvals and corrections are made directly in Blueforce. Now, overall, jobs with clocks, like I mentioned, if you have clocks, make sure that those mismatches and mispunches are corrected on the clock. Part of the process, and I'm not going to go through the whole process on this particular call, we'll say that for a future webinar, or if you have new information, there's some guidelines on this all on Gateway already. But nevertheless, mismatches and mispunches should be made on the clock by the on-site supervisor. One of the things we stress, if you have a clock, you can take care of those mismatches or those mispunches at the end of your shift. That's probably the best time to do it while employees are all left. Supervisor has the most visibility to those employees, so it's best to take care of those at the end of the shift. Now, jobs without clocks, those can be made by any Blueforce authorized user. So if you have access to those jobs, you may not be the general supervisor on site, but if you have access to those jobs, you can assist with the process. You can go in there and make those corrections to those mismatch punches or mispunches. Verify that time is worked with the supervisor. Fix that punch the first time if the employee didn't work that extra time, but more importantly, notify the DM to counsel a district manager or other management role there to counsel the employee and supervisor both. One, for the supervisor to get their employees to punch in and punch out correctly, but more important, get the employee to start doing it correctly. And then hopefully we're going to avoid those repeat occurrences by properly training the employee. Now, one thing I'll bring out, one of the things about these approvals, specifically on the clocks, is everyone using the clocks, it's all biometric. So you have a fingerprint that's essentially registered in the system. If that registration did not capture a good fingerprint, you're going to have issues on those clocks. So for those that are on the clocks, on this called the half clocks of their sites, if you have an employee that's struggling to punch in and punch out consistently on those clocks, re-register them first. That is always the solution there. If for some reason they still cannot register or they're not being successful at that, then we can take other actions. And that's when we stress for you to contact myself, contact Tiandra, and let's work through that, because there is a way to get them to be more successful on those clocks. And you just put in a help desk ticket and we can assist you with that. Now, as we wrap up, I just want to say that we do have some upcoming training webinars coming up. We do have a manual timesheet webinar in which I'll go through the manual timesheet process. Probably a short webinar, but nevertheless, that's going to be tomorrow, 1 p.m., in which we'll go through the manual timesheets. Then we're also going to do a Blueforce scheduling webinar, which will be next Wednesday, the 27th, also at 1 p.m. So these are going to be a little earlier than the weekly tips and changes webinars, but these are 1 p.m. Tomorrow and 1 p.m. next Wednesday. With that, as I mentioned, support. If you ever need a support assistance, please do us a favor and put in a help desk ticket. For those obviously that are aware, we have a IT help desk line that you can also call. At the very bottom, there's a 210-495-6093. But if you just go and put a help desk ticket using that link down at the bottom of this screen here, that takes you straight into our MCS system. You can go in there and put a help desk ticket. Tiandra and I will see that in our queue, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If it's after hours, you can always call the Epay support line or email them. They will be glad to assist you as well. Now, with that, I do thank you for joining us today. We'll do these sessions, these tips and changes sessions. Another one will be this Thursday, identical to today, but every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 p.m. Central. If you have any suggestions of items you want to see, please do me a favor and email me those in advance, so that way we can actually incorporate those. More so if you can let me know this week, so that way we can plan for next week. We'll get those in, get a little presentation behind that, and email everyone about those topics in the Epay update that's sent out on Mondays. But I do have a couple requests for items today that just came up during our call. So since we're stressed to just an hour, I try to keep that already kind of formatted in advance. So if you have any suggestions or anything that you want to hear, let me know, like I said, in advance, and we'll get those added for you for our next week's session. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us today. Keep in mind that, like I said, the links for next week's sessions and any of our trainings are available in that Epay update. So just look out for that, and you'll know exactly what we'll be covering. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.